The landlord is my dad, so please pack up and get out of the house, you and the mistress. The day my husband brought the mistress home, I was in the kitchen making soup for him. He threw a divorce agreement in my face. Sign it, then get lost. The house is mine, and you won't get a single cent. That woman wore my slippers, sat on my sofa, and smugly rubbed her pregnant belly. Sister, thank you for taking care of things these past few years. From now on, this home is mine. I watched them, neither crying nor making a scene. I simply picked up my phone and dialed the number saved as landlord. Dad, the tenant in the apartment you rented out wants to change the lady of the house. Do you agree? The soup was simmering in the purple clay pot, Leo's favorite black-bone chicken soup. I had added the finest herbs and simmered it slowly over low heat for a full 3 hours, the aroma filling the entire kitchen. From the entrance came the sound of the door lock turning. I wiped my hands and was about to go greet him when Leo walked in, his face colder and more disdainful than I had ever seen. Behind him followed a woman, a young woman with meticulously applied makeup, Viola, his assistant. I stood frozen. Leo didn't look at me, he strode straight to the living room, threw a document onto the coffee table with a sharp snap. That sound was like a thunderclap exploding in my ears. Wendy, sign. His voice was utterly devoid of warmth, each word like a poisoned ice pick. Sign it, then get lost. This house is mine, don't even think about taking a penny. I followed his gaze to the coffee table, where a document lay flat. The 5 bold characters divorce agreement stabbed painfully at my eyes. That woman named Viola had already taken it upon herself to slip on the plush slippers I had left by the door, ones I had just bought last week. She walked over to the sofa and sat down as if no one else was there, occupying the spot I usually loved to sit in. Leaning against my favorite cushion, she gently caressed her slightly rounded belly, her eyes full of provocation and pride. Sister, thank you for all your hard work these past few years, and for taking care of everything. Her voice was sweet and cloying, but it made me feel sick. From now on, this home and Leo will be taken care of by me. Home? Leo? I looked at the 2 people before me, one, the husband I had loved for 5 years, the man I cooked and cared for, the other, the woman he brought home, carrying his child. They were in the home I had carefully arranged with my own hands, plotting how to kick me out. My heart felt as if it were being gripped tightly by an invisible hand, the pain so intense I could barely breathe. But I didn't cry, nor did I hysterically question them. 5 years of marriage, I gave him everything, endured everything, and this is what I got in return. What good would crying or throwing a tantrum do? It would only make them laugh even more. I took a deep breath, forcibly suppressing the storm of pain raging inside my chest. Calmly, I picked up my phone, my fingers scrolling through the contacts until they stopped at one marked, Landlord. I pressed the call button. The phone was answered quickly, and a steady, caring voice came through. Wendy, what's wrong? I ignored the mocking glances Leo and Viola shot at me, my voice so calm it felt unfamiliar even to myself. Dad, about the apartment you rented out, the tenant wants to change the lady of the house. Do you agree? There was a brief silence on the other end of the line, then my dad's voice came through, tightly controlled but simmering with anger. I don't agree. Wherever my precious daughter is, that's where the lady of the house is. Wait for me. The call ended. The living room fell into a deathly silence. The expressions on Leo and Viola's faces shifted, from mockery to shock, and finally to uncontrollable laughter. Ha, ha 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 ha. Leo laughed as if he'd just heard the funniest joke of the century. He snatched the phone from my hand, flipped to the call log, saw the contact labeled Landlord, and laughed even more wildly. Wendy, are you out of your mind? What are you pretending for? Calling your dad to back you up? He threw the phone back at me, his eyes full of contempt and disdain. Your dad's just an old man retired and living off his pension. What can he do? Come argue for you? Or beg me not to leave you? Viola laughed softly, snuggling into Leo's arms, weak and delicate against him, but her gaze at me was like a poisoned dagger. Sister, stop struggling in vain. Leo loves me now, and the child in my belly. Even if you call your whole family, it won't change a thing. Leo said it himself, this house was bought with his own effort, it has nothing to do with you or your family. You're just a discarded ex-wife. I ignored their noisy chatter. Those hurtful words, in that very moment, could no longer pierce me. When the heart dies, it no longer feels pain. I turned around and calmly walked into the kitchen. Turned off the stove. I picked up the pot of black chicken soup I had simmered for 3 hours, walked to the sink, and without hesitation, poured it out. The scalding broth poured into the cold drain with a sizzling sound, releasing a plume of white steam. That sound was like the last unwilling wail of my 5-year marriage that had died. Then, everything fell silent. I walked into the bedroom and began packing my things. Leo followed in, leaning against the doorframe with his arms crossed, like a foreman, looking down on me with a condescending gaze. What? Still want to take something valuable with you? His tone was full of contempt and suspicion. I'm telling you, Wendy, every stitch and thread in this house was hard-earned by my Leo. You're leaving with nothing. I opened the wardrobe, which was filled with all kinds of designer clothes and bags Leo had bought for me. He always liked to flaunt these things as proof of his success and his generosity toward me, a housewife. My eyes swept over the luxurious garments without lingering. From the deepest part of the wardrobe, I pulled out a few old clothes I had bought before we got married, simple styles, even a bit outdated. I then walked over to the bookshelf, ignoring the neatly bound bestsellers, and took out an old book with a yellowed cover tucked in the corner. Finally, I picked up the photo frame on the bedside table. Inside was a picture of me with my parents, my smile carefree and untroubled. Leo looked at the small amount of things I had packed, his eyes full of confusion, and even a trace of unease he hadn't realized himself. He probably thought I would be crying and shouting, demanding a division of assets, settling accounts for these 5 years. He didn't expect me to leave so decisively. I dragged a small suitcase to the door. Viola was still sitting on the sofa, deliberately sticking out her belly to block my way. Sister, take care, no seeing you off. She looked down at the slippers on my feet and smiled triumphantly. Oh right, I'm not giving your slippers back to you, they're actually pretty comfortable. I expressionlessly stepped around her, opened the door, and walked out without looking back. Behind me, with a loud bang, the door slammed shut. It cut off their laughter, and it cut off my 5 years of youth and foolishness. I didn't go to any friend's house to cry, nor did I return to my parents for comfort. I took a taxi straight to the most expensive 5-star hotel in the city center. The receptionist glanced at me, noticing I was carrying only a small suitcase, her eyes curious, but the moment she saw the black gold supplementary card I handed over, her demeanor immediately turned respectful. Using my own card, I booked the executive suite with the best view. Stepping into the room, I tossed the small suitcase into a corner and collapsed heavily onto the soft, large bed. My phone vibrated wildly in my pocket. I pulled it out to see a flood of humiliating messages from Leo. Wendy, don't think hiding will help. I'm telling you, be at the Civil Affairs Bureau at 9 a.m. tomorrow. If you dare not show up, you'll face the consequences. What can your poor landlord dad do for you? Have him come collect the rent? Ha ha ha. I'm waiting for him. Immediately after, a photo popped up. It was a selfie of Leo and Viola in the living room, kissing intimately, with the sofa and curtains I personally chose in the background. Below the photo was a caption, "See, this is the real owner of this home." I stared at that photo, a dull ache stirring again in my chest. But I didn't reply, nor did I delete it. I simply switched my phone to silent and tossed it aside. Then I walked into the bathroom, turned on the shower, letting the scalding hot water wash over me. The steam filled the entire space, blurring my vision. I closed my eyes, and the fragments of the past 5 years flashed through my mind like a movie. From the sweet love in college to marrying him resolutely despite my father's opposition. From giving up my own career, willingly becoming the woman behind him, to now, him bringing his mistress right into our home. The water poured down from above, indistinguishable from tears. I told myself, Wendy, cry just this once. After this cry, the old Wendy would be completely dead. I don't know how long passed before the water gradually cooled. I turned off the shower, wrapped myself in a towel, and walked over to the huge floor-to-ceiling mirror. The reflection in the mirror showed a pale face, swollen red eyes, utterly disheveled. Yet those eyes were unusually bright, shining as if forged in fire. I looked at myself in the mirror and spoke each word clearly, Wendy, from today on, you live only for yourself. I picked up my phone and sent a message to my dad. Dad, I'm fine, settled in the hotel. Tomorrow, proceed as planned. Almost instantly, he replied. Don't worry, my precious daughter, if the sky falls, Dad will hold it up. Get a good night's sleep. Tomorrow, watch Dad get justice for you. Seeing that message, the last trace of unease in my heart vanished. That night, I slept more soundly than ever. Meanwhile, on the other side, Leo and Viola were in what used to be my home, celebrating their victory. Leo opened a bottle of red wine, one I had specially bought last month to celebrate his promotion. Now, he used that bottle to toast my departure. Viola, come, let's have a drink to celebrate the start of our new life. Viola shyly leaned against him. Leo, I'm pregnant, I can't drink. Right, look at me, I'm so happy I forgot. Leo patted his head, then looked at her with deep affection. Viola, I'm sorry for making you wait. In a few days, we'll go get the marriage certificate, and then you and the baby will have a proper status. Viola's eyes lit up. Leo, what about this house? Don't worry. Leo patted his chest confidently and boasted shamelessly, of course this house is ours. You know how I fought my way up from a poor kid to now, buying this luxury home all by myself. Wendy's family, besides being a burden to me, can't give me anything. Her dad is just a stubborn retired old man, what use is he? Viola looked at him with admiration, taking his fabricated stories as gospel truth. Leo, you're amazing. I knew I didn't make a mistake choosing you. You're my hero. She had even started planning to turn the spare bedroom into a nursery, to buy the most expensive crib, to give the baby the best life possible. They were lost in the beautiful dreams they had woven themselves, completely unaware of the devastating storm about to hit their future. They didn't know that the territory they so proudly claimed was nothing more than a testing ground set by my father. And now, the test was over. The cheating candidates were about to be expelled. At 8 o'clock the next morning, Leo and Viola were still sound asleep in the big bed when a sharp, loud doorbell woke them up. Who is it? So early in the morning, what's the rush? Leo grumbled impatiently, got out of bed with his hair all messy, and went to open the door. He thought it was me, regretting it, coming back crying to beg for his forgiveness. He had even already planned how to humiliate me again, how to make me kneel and beg him. However, the moment he opened the door, the impatience and smugness on his face froze instantly. Standing outside were not me, but several burly men dressed in sharp black suits, wearing sunglasses. Leading the group was a middle-aged man with such a powerful aura that no one dared to look him directly in the eye. It was my father, Robert. Behind him followed a man wearing gold-rimmed glasses, carrying a briefcase, looking sharp and capable. Leo was stunned. He had met my dad a few times, but his impression was of a silent, somewhat down-and-out retired old man. Yet the man before him now had eyes sharp as an eagle's, radiating the oppressive presence of someone long accustomed to power. You're Wendy's dad? What are you doing here? Leo stammered. My father didn't even glance at him, walking straight past and stepping into the house he had personally purchased. He looked around, his gaze sweeping over the messy clothes on the sofa, the half-empty bottle of red wine on the coffee table, growing colder by the second. His expression was not that of a guest, but of a king inspecting his defiled domain. I'm here to take back my house. My dad's voice was not loud, but it was firm and resolute, each word striking Leo's heart like a hammer. At this moment, Viola, wearing one of Leo's oversized shirts, rubbed her eyes and walked out of the bedroom. Seeing the scene in the living room, she was startled, screaming as she hid behind Leo, clutching his arm tightly. Leo felt suffocated by my dad's imposing presence, but once he remembered that the property deed was in his name, his courage swelled again. He snapped back to reality, furious and shouting, "Are you crazy, old man? This is my house. Mine. The deed says Leo's name on it. You're trespassing, I'm calling the police." No sooner had he finished speaking than the lawyer with gold-rimmed glasses behind my dad stepped forward, took a document from his briefcase, and handed it to Leo. "Leo, hello, I am Mr. Roberts' personal lawyer. Please take a good look, the property deed for this house does indeed have your name on it." Hearing this, a trace of smugness appeared on Leo's face. But the lawyer's next words plunged him into an icy abyss. "However, this is a conditional gift. It's clearly stated in the supplementary clause of the prenuptial agreement you signed before marrying Ms. Wendy." The lawyer pushed up his glasses, his voice cold and professional. "Ownership of this property is contingent solely and necessarily on the continuation of your marriage to Ms. Wendy. Should the marriage dissolve and the investigation finds you at fault, this gift will automatically become void, and the property must be unconditionally returned to the original donor, my client, Mr. Robert. Currently, we have ample evidence proving your infidelity during the marriage and that you initiated the divorce, making you the party at fault. Therefore, legally speaking, this house no longer belongs to you." Leo was struck as if by lightning, his whole body frozen. He snatched the document, staring at the stark black and white words and the flamboyant signature he had carelessly signed before, his hands trembling like leaves in the autumn wind. He remembered. Before the wedding, my dad had handed him a document to sign. At the time, he was too excited about marrying me and moving into this big house to pay attention. He thought it was just a routine prenuptial agreement. He never imagined that such a colossal trap was hidden within. "No. Impossible. This is fake. You forged these documents," he screamed hysterically. My dad let out a disdainful cold laugh, filled with contempt for the buffoon. He waved to the black-clad bodyguards behind him and gave the order. "Give them half an hour. Remove everything that doesn't belong to them." Leo completely broke down. Like a frenzied beast, he tore the documents in his hands to shreds, the pieces scattering across the floor like snowflakes. "I'm not moving. This is my home. No one is going to kick me out." He pulled out his phone, his fingers trembling as he dialed the police. "Hello? Police? I want to report a break-in. Someone is trespassing in my home. And trying to take my house." "Yes. Right at." The lawyer watched his clumsy performance without a flicker of emotion. Calmly, he pulled another document from his briefcase. It was an immediate enforcement order stamped with the court's bright red seal. It turned out my dad had anticipated Leo's tantrum and deceit, and had already prepared thoroughly through legal channels. Soon, 2 police officers arrived. Leo seemed to have found a savior and immediately rushed forward to complain, "Officer, it's them. They broke into my house and are trying to kick me out." The police ignored his agitation and instead turned to our lawyer, routinely verifying the documents. The lawyer handed over all the proof, including the supplementary agreement, evidence of Leo's infidelity during the marriage, and the court's enforcement order. After carefully checking, the officer's expression turned serious as he faced Leo, his voice devoid of any emotion. "Leo, after verification, this gentleman is the legal owner of this property. The court now requires you to cooperate immediately with the owner to clear the premises. If you refuse, we will take compulsory measures against you for obstructing official duties." Those words were like a bucket of ice water, extinguishing all of Leo's arrogance from head to toe. His face, once flushed with anger, instantly turned as pale as death. The neighbors were startled by the huge commotion over here, and one after another opened their doors, poking their heads out to see what was going on. They saw Leo, the project director who usually dressed in a suit and acted all proper, now being blocked at the door like a madman. They saw Viola, who often linked arms with Leo and claimed to be his cousin to outsiders, now disheveled and panicked, hiding behind him. Those pointing fingers, those whispered comments, they were like sharp knives, tearing apart piece by piece the dignity and pride Leo had always held dear. Isn't that Director Leo? What happened to him? Who's that woman next to him? That's not his wife. I've seen his wife before, she's quite gentle. I heard she's the mistress who drove the original wife away, and now the wife's family has come knocking. TSK, you really can't judge a person by their face. Viola was so overwhelmed by their gazes that she felt utterly ashamed, scared to tears, and kept pulling on Leo's arm. Leo, what do we do? Our home is going to be gone, home? At this moment, Leo found those two words unbearably ironic. The bodyguards were extremely efficient, they paid no attention to Leo and Viola's cries and began clearing the place out. They pulled out several huge black garbage bags and started stuffing Leo and Viola's clothes and belongings into them, one piece at a time, as if throwing away trash. Viola's designer bags, which she treasured like precious jewels, were roughly yanked out of the closet and carelessly tossed onto the floor, covered in dust. Leo tried to step forward to stop them but was each grabbed by a bodyguard on either side, lifted off the ground like a struggling chicken, unable to move. He could only watch helplessly as everything he had worked hard for was mercilessly cleared out. Half an hour later, Leo, Viola, and several large bags of trash-like junk were invited down to the apartment building. My dad had already had the highest-grade smart lock installed, with fingerprint, password, and iris recognition, triple verification. From now on, this home had nothing to do with them. Just then, the roar of a sports car approached from afar. A fiery red Porsche 911, executing a perfect drift, came to a steady stop in front of them. The window slowly rolled down. I wore a pair of oversized sunglasses, covering half my face and all my emotions. I looked at those two disheveled, defeated people downstairs, like dogs who had lost their home, and a cold curve tugged at the corner of my mouth. Leo, Viola. I called their names. They looked up, and when they saw me, their eyes were filled with shock, resentment, and disbelief. I slowly took off my sunglasses and stared at them. Forgot to tell you, I said, this car was a gift from my dad too. Leo's eyes instantly reddened, bloodshot. He stared at me, at the red sports car behind me, as if trying to devour me with his gaze. Wendy. You've set me up, he roared, charging toward my car, only to be firmly blocked by the bodyguards. I didn't even bother to lift an eyelid, simply saying coolly to the driver, let's go. The Porsche let out a low growl, speeding away, leaving their curses and humiliation far behind. In the rearview mirror, their figures grew smaller and smaller until they became two blurry black dots. My dad sat in the passenger seat, handing me a bottle of water. Wendy, feel better now? I shook my head, then nodded. Dad, this is just the beginning. Yes, this is just the beginning. Taking back the house is merely reclaiming what was rightfully mine. But the betrayal and humiliation he inflicted on me, I will make him pay back 1,000-fold, even more. Leo and Viola, homeless, had no choice but to temporarily stay in a cheap, noisy motel. The room was filled with a damp, musty smell, the sheets were yellowed, and the blankets sticky. Viola threw up as soon as she entered, crying and begging to move somewhere else. Leo, frustrated and anxious, wanted to use their savings to book a better hotel, but when he opened the mobile banking app, he found that the joint account under our names had already been frozen by my legal application. His own salary card, which he had nearly drained buying Viola all sorts of luxury goods to please her recently, was almost empty. He was completely panicked. He started calling me frantically, sending messages. At first, it was nothing but curses, using every vile word to insult me. I didn't answer a single call or reply to a single message. When he realized cursing didn't work, he changed tactics, sending long paragraphs begging, reminiscing about the good times we had, saying he was just momentarily confused, begging for my forgiveness. Looking at those hypocritical words, I felt nothing but disgust. I immediately blocked all his and Viola's contact information. The world finally became peaceful. I returned to what used to be home. The cleaning service had scrubbed every corner spotless, everything Leo and Viola had used, from toothbrushes and towels to sheets and blankets, had been thrown into the trash. The air was filled with a fresh lemon scent, no longer tainted by the foul presence of those two. My dad sat beside me on the sofa, his expression serious. "Wendy, kicking him out is just the first step. What do you want to do next?" I looked at my father, the man who loved me the most in this world. From the very beginning, he saw through Leo's true nature, which is why he set up the rental test. Unfortunately, I was blinded by love back then and failed to understand my father's good intentions. Now, I won't let him down again. I spoke calmly, "Dad, I want to take back everything he gained through me. His career, reputation, dignity, none of it can remain." My dad nodded with satisfaction. "Good. I support you." He told me that the reason Leo rose so quickly to the position of project director was because he was currently in charge of the company's most important project. And the biggest investor in that project was David, a longtime friend of my dad. Back then, it was my dad who brokered the deal that got Leo's company this project. It was also my dad who hinted to David to look out for Leo. Yet Leo credited it all to his own ability and charm, even smugly boasting in front of me that he was the backbone of the company, and without him, it would collapse. How ridiculous. He was merely standing on the shoulders of giants but thought he was a flea that could reach the sky. Without hesitation, I called David myself in front of my dad. On the call, I didn't cry over my grievances or exaggerate anything. I simply stated the facts in the calmest tone: Leo's infidelity during the marriage and his attempt to seize marital assets. There was a long silence on the other end before David sighed. "Wendy, David misjudged the man. Rest assured, David will give you an answer on this." He immediately declared he would never work with someone so morally corrupt and ungrateful. The next day, while Leo was frantically trying to clean up the mess of being kicked out of the house, he received an extremely harshly worded email from the largest investor in the company's biggest project. The email clearly demanded an immediate replacement of the project leader, otherwise, they would unilaterally terminate the cooperation and hold his company liable for breach of contract. This email exploded like a bomb among the company's top executives. Leo was immediately summoned by his direct superior into the office and was scolded harshly. The career he took pride in, the foundation he relied on for survival, had developed its first and most fatal crack. Within the company, the atmosphere shifted rapidly. Colleagues who had been calling him director and Leo just yesterday now looked at him differently. There was sympathy, schadenfreude, but more often avoidance. He tried to explain to his superior, hoping to salvage the project, but was coldly blocked at the door by the secretary with the excuse that the boss is in a meeting. When he sought out the project team members to discuss a strategy, they all claimed to be busy with work and avoided him as if he were a plague. When the tree falls, the monkeys scatter. Human nature is cold and indifferent, always has been. The massive blow to his career left him overwhelmed. And Viola became another heavy mountain pressing down on him. The cheap motel's conditions only worsened her pregnancy symptoms. She complained every day, blaming Leo for being incompetent, unable even to secure a decent place to live. "Leo, can you get your act together or not? How long are we supposed to stay in this godforsaken place? I'm about to lose it. You said you were so capable, so how come you can't even keep a roof over our heads? Were you lying to me?" Leo's head ached from her constant yelling. For the first time, he saw the gentle, charming woman he once adored as nothing but noisy and foolish. Just as he was besieged both inside and out, his old home exploded. His parents, his countless aunts and uncles, those relatives who had been enjoying his support, which was actually spending my money, over the past few years, upon hearing that he had been kicked out of the mansion, started calling one after another. They weren't calling out of concern for him, but to question me. The calls came to me. It was my mother-in-law, Leo's mother. The moment the call connected, a torrent of crude and vile curses poured out. "Wendy, you useless hen. What's wrong with Leo having a woman on the side? He's the seed of the Chen family. Who do you think you are, kicking him out? You jinx. Is it because of you that Leo's life is going downhill? I'm telling you, give the house back to Leo immediately or I'll make a scene at your workplace. I'll ruin your reputation." I didn't argue with her. I simply quietly turned on the voice recorder on my phone. After she finished scolding and was panting heavily, I finally spoke up, unhurriedly. "Are you done talking?" "I'm done. Now listen to me." I sent the package I had prepared long ago, a compressed file, into their family chat group named A Loving Family. Inside the compressed file were intimate photos of Leo and Viola from various angles. Photos of him being dragged out of the house by bodyguards, thrown out like trash. Evidence of his affair during the marriage and his attempts to transfer assets. Finally, I attached a record of every transfer I had made to their family through Leo over the past 5 years, a staggering total. Then, I sent a voice message in the group. "Dear elders, the son you are proud of, the Leo you boast about as the family's glory, is a scoundrel who cheated during marriage and even tried to seize the house his own wife lives in. And every penny of the filial money you've spent over the years came from me, your despised daughter-in-law, the one you call Baron. From today on, I will no longer support this family. For your retirement and your escape from poverty, go find your good son and nephew." After sending this message, I immediately left the group chat. One can imagine the storm of chaos that erupted in that group chat. Sure enough, in less than 10 minutes, Leo called, his voice a furious roar of desperation. "Wendy. Are you crazy? Why did you post those things in my family group chat? Do you want to ruin me?" I sneered coldly. "Ruin you? Leo, from the moment you brought that woman through the door, you've already destroyed yourself with your own hands. Weren't you always convinced that you were the pillar holding up me and your family? Well, now, I don't want that pillar anymore. You hold it up yourself." With that, I hung up the phone. Soon, the tide turned back in Leo's hometown. The blame shifted from me to him. They cursed him for being shameful and disgraceful, for being heartless and ungrateful, and most importantly, for cutting off the family's financial lifeline. Viola's pregnancy symptoms were getting worse and worse. She kept insisting on going to the best private hospital for her prenatal checkups. Leo looked at the pitiful balance left in his bank account and found even the registration fee for the special outpatient clinic at a public hospital was tight. The two of them had their first intense argument since getting married, all because of money and their future. Viola looked at the irritable, incompetent, and destitute man in front of her and, for the first time, began to doubt whether the prosperous and beautiful life he once promised her was nothing but a complete lie. Crushed under the dual pressures of work and family, Leo found himself, one late night, nostalgically recalling the past. He missed how I kept the house in perfect order, missed the hot meals I prepared for him, missed the gentleness with which I never pressured him. Through a mutual friend, he got my new number. He sent me a 1,000-word apology message, filled with regret and pleas for reconciliation between the lines. I read every word carefully, then pressed the delete key with a blank expression. Crocodile tears are not worthy of sympathy. Belated affection is cheaper than grass. I thought the setbacks in his career and being abandoned by everyone would be enough for Leo to face reality. But I underestimated his shamelessness and overestimated his intelligence. He actually believed that as long as he dealt with the project leader issue, he could be reinstated and everything would return to normal. He started pulling strings, hosting dinners, and giving gifts, trying to salvage the situation. But I had no intention of stopping there. To cut the grass, you must remove the roots. I had my dad's company legal team quietly start gathering all possible violations Leo might have committed during his tenure. Leo is extremely arrogant and loves to show off. To show off his abilities in front of Viola and to pocket more illicit income, he took advantage of his position during this major project to accept numerous kickbacks from suppliers. He thought his accounts were flawless and that no one knew. But what he didn't realize was that one of the downstream material suppliers who gave him the largest kickbacks was actually a mole my dad had planted long ago. From the very beginning of their cooperation, this supplier made complete backups of every transaction with Leo, every transfer record, and even recordings of every meeting and conversation. My dad said this was supposed to be one of the dowries prepared for me. If Leo had behaved himself, these things would never see the light of day. But if he had other intentions, this would be the death warrant that sends him on his way. Now, the time had come. I compiled all the concrete evidence into a complete report and anonymously sent it to the disciplinary inspection department at Leo Company's headquarters, as well as to the local tax audit authorities. A single stone stirred up 1,000 waves. The top executives at Leo, already deeply displeased with him due to the sudden backlash from the project investors, immediately formed a special investigation team upon receiving this detailed and appalling complaint. Leo was suspended on the spot and placed under investigation. He was utterly panicked. He tried to find someone to help, to smooth things over, but discovered that those colleagues and subordinates who once called him brother, flattered him, and fawned over him now avoided him like the plague. Calls went unanswered, messages ignored. Only at this moment did he bitterly realize that his so-called connections, his so-called status, his so-called everything, were nothing but a castle in the air built on the identity of being Wendy's husband. Once that identity was stripped away, he was nothing. The investigation results came out quickly. Embezzlement, commercial bribery, tax evasion, amounts so huge they could send him to prison for life. To distance itself and salvage its reputation, the company immediately chose to report the matter to the police. The day the police came knocking, Leo was in a cheap motel room, arguing fiercely with Viola over the last bit of living expenses. The moment the cold handcuffs clicked around his wrists, he completely collapsed. His face went ashen, his eyes vacant. All his pride, arrogance, and ambition were utterly shattered in that instant. Viola witnessed it all, her legs giving way as she sank to the floor in shock. Watching Leo being taken away by the police, feeling the baby stir inside her womb, she experienced a bone-deep fear and despair for the first time. The child she once saw as her trump card to enter the elite world had now become the greatest burden of her life. After Leo was taken into criminal custody, Viola completely lost her source of income. She was unwilling to accept it. She blamed all her resentment on me. She even found out the address of my new company and waited for me downstairs. That day, I had just finished a meeting and stepped out of the company building when I saw her. Her pregnancy was already quite obvious, her face pale and sallow, lips cracked, no longer the delicate and arrogant woman she once was, she looked haggard and pitiful. The moment she saw me, she rushed over, tears streaming down her face. "Sister Wendy. Please. Please spare Leo." She tried to grab my hand but was stopped by the bodyguard behind me. She then knelt on the ground, crying hoarsely. "I was wrong. I really was wrong. I was deceived by him too. He told me he had no feelings for you anymore, that he would marry me, that he would give me and the child a home. I didn't know things would turn out like this. The child is innocent. He can't be born without a father. I beg you, have mercy, give him a chance to live, and give me and the child a chance to live too." She acted with all her might, tears streaming down her face, drawing the attention of passers-by. I looked down on her, this once arrogant woman now kneeling and begging, and found her utterly laughable. "A chance to live?" I said coldly, my voice low but clear enough to reach her ears. Viola, you wore my slippers, sat on my sofa, and flaunted the trophy in your belly. Did you ever think about giving me a chance to live? When you and Leo threw me out like trash, did you ever think about giving me a chance to live? Each of my rhetorical questions was like a slap, striking her face hard. Her sobs faltered, her face turning deathly pale. When softness didn't work, she immediately changed tactics, scrambling to her feet and starting to throw a tantrum. Wendy. You vicious woman. I hope you die a terrible death. You've gone so far, aren't you afraid of karma? It's you. You're the one who drove us to this. She pointed her finger at my nose, shouting curses, trying to use public opinion to blackmail me. I didn't get angry, my expression didn't change at all. I simply took out my phone calmly, opened a recording, and pressed play. From the phone came Leo's frantic voice. It was a call he made to me from a friend's phone after being kicked out of the house. Wendy, you bitch. You think this will bring me down? No way. That stupid Viola and the bastard in her belly are just tools I'm using to get rid of you, you old hag. You really think I'm into her? When I make my comeback, I'll dump her immediately. There are plenty of younger, prettier women lined up waiting for me. Just you wait. I, Leo, will make you regret this. The recording echoed in the quiet air, every word crystal clear. Viola's face drained of color in an instant. She stared at the phone in my hand in disbelief, her body swaying unsteadily. I turned off the recording, walked up to her, and in a voice only the two of us could hear, said, "Did you hear that? You're not some savior's true love, you're just a pawn, just like him. Too bad, you both chose the wrong chessboard." After saying that, I didn't look at her again and turned to walk into the company building. Behind me was her complete breakdown, the sound of desperate sobbing. A few days later, I heard from a friend that Viola, under immense psychological stress, had a miscarriage and lost the baby. She returned to her hometown alone, tail between her legs. Her dream of marrying into a wealthy family was shattered more thoroughly than the shards of broken porcelain on the ground. Before the court hearing, Leo, through his lawyer, requested a meeting with me. I agreed. I wanted to see what he could possibly say at this point. In the visitation room of the detention center, separated by a thick pane of glass, I saw Leo again. He wore a gray prison uniform, had shaved his head, and looked much thinner, his eye sockets sunken, no longer the confident, arrogant man he once was. In just a few days, he seemed to have aged 10 years. He picked up the phone receiver, saw it was me, and his cloudy eyes instantly filled with bloodshot veins, his voice hoarse and barely recognizable. Wendy. He called my name, his voice trembling. Wendy, I was wrong, I really was. Please give me one more chance, okay? For the sake of our 5 years of marriage, please save me. He began to ramble endlessly about the sweetness of when we first got together, recalling all the little things I had done for him, trying to stir my sympathy with these cheap sentiments. I didn't interrupt him, I just quietly listened. It was like hearing a story that had nothing to do with me. When he finally ran out of breath and stopped, looking at me with eyes full of hope, I slowly picked up the receiver. I asked him a question. Leo, did you ever love me? He froze, his gaze starting to dodge mine, unable to meet my eyes. In the end, under my steady stare, he struggled to nod and squeezed out 2 words through clenched teeth. Loved you. I laughed. A genuine laugh, so heartfelt that tears nearly welled up in my eyes. Leo, you really are hopeless. You're still lying even today. My voice, cold as ice, traveled through the receiver into his ear. You don't love me, Wendy. What you love is the shortcut my family background gives you. You love the way my unconditional devotion feeds your pitiful pride. You love the vain thrill of stepping over me to climb higher. What you love is yourself, a self that's both insecure and arrogant, distorted beyond recognition by desire. Each word I spoke was like a blade, peeling away his false facade and stabbing straight into his darkest core. His face turned as pale as paper. There's no affection left between us. I looked at his desperate face and told him word by word. The moment you brought that woman through our door, it was over. I stood up, looking down on him from above. Reform yourself well. This is my final piece of advice to you, as your ex-wife. After I finished speaking, I hung up the phone, turned around, and left without looking back at him once. Behind me came his hysterical, sobbing roar. That voice could no longer stir even the slightest ripple in my heart. Leo's case was quickly adjudicated. With multiple charges combined, he was sentenced to 10 years in prison. 10 years, enough time for a person's prime to rot away completely behind bars. I formally filed for divorce in court. Because of his infidelity during the marriage and significant financial crimes, I won the case with almost no effort. Not only did I reclaim all the property that belonged to me, but I also didn't have to pay him any compensation. Between him and me, the legal ties were finally severed cleanly and completely. The first thing I did was put up for sale the marital home that held too many filthy memories. The house sold quickly, and the price was decent. I didn't want to keep anything related to him. With the money from the sale, plus my own savings, I founded a small angel investment company. I specifically support young entrepreneurs who are talented and have dreams but lack opportunities and capital. I no longer want to be the woman behind someone else. I want to stand in the sunlight and be my own queen. At the same time, I officially joined my dad's company, starting from the very bottom as a project assistant. My dad didn't give me any special privileges, he threw me into the most complex projects to train me and help me learn. He was very pleased and finally felt at ease, beginning to focus more energy on nurturing me, his only heir. I cut off my long hair that I had kept for years and put on a sharp, professional outfit. My days were filled with meetings, reports, and project negotiations, busy, yet incredibly fulfilling. I picked up my college hobby again, horseback riding. On the open riding field, I galloped freely, feeling the wind roaring past my ears. That long-lost sense of freedom and passion made me feel truly alive again. All my friends say that after the divorce, I seemed like a completely different person. I was glowing from within. But I know, I didn't become someone new. I simply found the real me that had been worn away during those 5 years of marriage. A year later, I received a letter from prison. It was from Leo. The paper was rough and yellowed, and the handwriting was shaky, revealing the turmoil inside the writer's heart. In the letter, he no longer begged or made excuses. Instead, he truly confessed. He admitted to his own insecurities and distortions, acknowledging that from the very beginning, his feelings toward me were filled with jealousy and manipulation. He said that during this year in prison, he couldn't sleep at night. Whenever he closed his eyes, all he could see were the little things I had done for him in the past, those details he once scorned and took for granted. He stayed up late for an important contract, and I stayed with him, making coffee and preparing late-night snacks. When he was sick, I stayed awake all night caring for him, feeding him water and medicine. When his parents came to the city, I ran around attending to them with meticulous care, more devoted than a biological daughter. He said that only after losing everything did he realize how foolish he had been to destroy the most precious thing in the world with his own hands. At the end of the letter, he didn't ask for my forgiveness. He simply said he hoped everything would go well for me in the future and that I wouldn't meet anyone like him again. I read the letter calmly, feeling nothing inside. Forgive? Not forgive? Those things no longer mattered to me. I didn't reply. Instead, I fed the letter, along with its envelope, into the office shredder. Watching the pieces, carrying his belated remorse, fall from the other side of the machine, I felt a profound sense of relief. His life, his pain, his awakening, none of it has anything to do with me anymore. His repentance came too late and was far too cheap. For me, the best revenge isn't to make him suffer, but to make him vanish completely from my world. To utterly ignore him. It was another bright and sunny weekend. I was hosting a small celebration party in the garden of my own villa. Celebrating the success of my investment company's very first project, which had just gone public on the Nasdaq. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting dappled shadows on the lawn. My friends, my family, and my business partners gathered together, raising their glasses in joyful toasts. My dad, dressed casually and glowing with pride, lifted his glass and proudly introduced to everyone, "This is my daughter, Wendy. She is also my greatest pride and my successor, Robert." Amidst the warm applause and blessings from everyone, I spotted a gentle figure in the crowd. It was David's son, a remarkably talented young architectural designer. We had frequent contact due to a real estate investment project. He had always admired my business acumen and decisive style. Holding a glass of champagne, he approached me with a sincere smile full of appreciation. "Congratulations." I returned an equally radiant smile. "Thank you. And thank you for your professional advice back then." We said little, just exchanged smiles, but a new, beautiful possibility was quietly blossoming in the air. I looked up at the sky, clear and bright, the sunlight just right, the breeze gentle. My life was only just beginning. As for Leo, who he was, I could no longer remember.